The Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
Hey, what's going on? It is Midwest Swing, part of the Zone Coverage Podcast Network. It's a little different voice than you might be accustomed to. This is Brandon Warne coming back at you after a bit of a hiatus. You've been hearing Mike Berardino do the show of late, but we're stepping in for an emergency edition of the podcast. The Twins have hired a new manager. He goes by the name Rocco Baldelli, and I'm here to talk about it with our faithful and trusty sidekick, Tom Schreier at tschreier3 on Twitter. Tom, what's going on?
Not too much. We should explain real quick. Mike has done a great job bringing in guests. He is, for people that don't know, I think people realize this at this point, though, he is covering the Notre Dame Fighting Irish football team on their crazy season, a great season.
Number 3 in the nation, I believe.
Yep, number 3 in the nation. He's covering them for the Indy Star, great paper out there in Indianapolis. He still will have guests. Do you have anyone that stand out to you, Brandon? People you like that have been on the show?
John Parado is always going to have he'll be near and dear to me for a very long time because he was kind of one of the people that helped me get my journalism career off the ground at Baseball Prospectus. And he was on the show during its first run with me and just a wonderful man. He lives in Pittsburgh. He just joined up with Dejan Kovacevic's website out there, which is, I guess, kind of the precursor to The Athletic. So he's a wonderful man, does a wonderful job out there and was looking for a full-time work for a very long time. So I'm glad he's kind of gotten back on his feet. He's battled cancer of late, and he's just a really great story. Yeah,
so him, Gene Glynn, Wayne, Big Fella Hadaway, Trevor Plouffe, who knows Rocco a little bit. We've had a few different guests, but I think eventually we're going to be passing the baton, given that Mike obviously still has great knowledge of the team dating back to last year. But, Brandon, this felt to me a little bit like the indicator that this is the Valvy Levine regime. It seems like they got a great guy. And in some ways, I felt like we got to consider where Mauer goes and that whole saga. But I felt like this was a little bit of a page turn from maybe a disappointing season last year to looking forward to the next Twin season.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are really excited about this hiring and the fact that the Twins are going in a different direction. I mean, it's someone with big league experience, both in terms of coaching, not necessarily managing, but a guy who played in the big leagues for a long time, maybe not as long as his prospect status would have, merited, but that was kind of out of his control in terms of health and that sort of thing. And so obviously youngest manager in baseball is going to maybe make people's ears perk up a little bit, but appears to be a very well-liked guy pretty much everywhere he's been, whether it's Tampa Bay, where he spent pretty much his entire professional career, both on the field and off the field. Did spend a year in Boston as well, made some good relationships there, Terry Francona, so on and so forth. But it'd be hard-pressed to find anybody in baseball that has a bad word to say about Rocco Baldelli, and that came out when Derek Falvey and Thad Levine introduced him today. Obviously, you and I representing Zone Coverage at the press conference today. Big crowd. I mean, pretty much everyone came out. You had Corey Provis from the radio network and a lot of the executives. Rob Anthony, who we haven't seen much of late. Dave St. Peter. You had the Pohlad family. You had Rocco Baldelli's entire family. And then pretty much every outlet had at least 2 people covering the presser. I believe The Athletic even did, but the Minneapolis paper had 4 people, if I remember correctly. And so, yeah, it was a pretty big crowd coming out. And I think Baldelli's going to inject some energy, youthful energy into this franchise, a franchise that has grown a little bit stale, even with Mahler only managing for a handful of years. I think it was time for something new. And I think everything that Baldelli did was, winning the press conference without the negative connotation of a Tim Brewster, or if you ask Patrick Royce, PJ Fleck. I think he won over the room. And if you look at Royce's Twitter, even he was, maybe begrudgingly accepting of him, but it wasn't a bunch of meaningless platitudes. He just sounded like a guy who wants to relationships with these players, get to know them, and hopefully win some games with them.
Yeah, my takeaway, they do the press conference that you see on TV or through Periscope. I know you Periscoped it, and it's up on YouTube right now on the site.
Yep, youtube.com/zone coverage.
Yep, so you can go see it through Brandon's perspective, I guess. But yeah, there's a press conference you see there, and then the Twins are very transparent. I know with Molitor, they got out of there quick. That may have been a combination of Molitor was not there, wasn't really emotionally ready to talk to everyone. It's really rare that you get a firing like Gardy's where he's there and sitting next to Terry Ryan and all this. And Falvey and Levine probably put in a tough spot. They felt like they had to make a change. And this is, they had Molitor, who I think you were as well, Brandon. I was a fan of just as a guy, open-minded with all the new age stuff. But having heard him talk just briefly, understanding how he approaches baseball to the extent that you can after a 30-minute press conference, and trying to seek a little bit more information, I went to Thad Levine first, and just kind of asked him, was there any moment in the interview process, was it a cumulative thing where you sat back and looked at all the guys and he stood out? And I mean, he said it may be revisionist history. He felt like from kind of minute one, he had his guy. This guy he's hard to classify. He's not a straight up stat head. He doesn't read like that. He's certainly not an old school guy at 37 where had things panned out a little differently as a 6 overall pick. He maybe still could be in the league, unfortunately. But he doesn't come off as a Joe Madden type or a Kevin Cash, or, I think Cash is those younger kind of, you almost want to take the Red Bull out of their hand and tell him to take a nap or something, settle down a little bit. But he's unique. I thought he was very thoughtful, answered honestly, and he always came back to, it's all about relationships. They're going to respect me not because I'm Paul Molitor, baseball icon, and they're not going to like me because I'm Ron Gardenhire, kind of the goofball Southern guy. It's because I established a relationship with each and every one of them.
Well, and let me just say this too. A lot of people saying that Molitor got a raw deal. If you look at his career winning percentage and this year's winning percentage, they're about the same. And so if you can tell yourself that this year went how you would have liked, then you can talk yourself into Molitor as a manager. And if you tell yourself that this was a disappointing year, then why isn't his career disappointing with the same winning percentage? So I think that was part of the dissonance that I saw as far as people thinking the Twins did a Hall of Famer and local son dirty, was that I think everybody was aware that this year was a disappointment. And again, too, they won a whole bunch of games at the end of the year to make their record look a whole lot better than it was. And a big part of that was facing teams that had less interest in winning than the Twins did, which was hard to believe that those teams existed. Anyway, back to Baldelli, though. Yeah, I agree. I think he's going to be able to be one of those people who can funnel all the information he gets from the R&D people and turn it into on-field decisions. I mean, that's a big thing, too. People want to know if these guys believe in analytics and all that. And it's more about how you can learn each of how these guys and how they tick, and how you can teach them things that make them a better player, most likely coming from the analytics as far as a guy chasing sliders or sequencing for a pitcher and talking them into doing things that are going to make them better. Ryan Pressly with the curveball or anything like that. I mean, that's kind of the biggest example that we've seen recently because of how far Houston went and how many stories people had to write just to fill space. You find out that Ryan Pressly didn't throw his curveball as much with the Twins, and Houston's like, yeah, you really need to do this. They showed him the analytics and got him to do it, and he was obviously lights out for that last month or so. But yeah, I think that Baldelli just is going to bring a different kind of dynamic. But let me just say this too. I heard a lot of people saying they needed to go outside of the organization rather than Derek Shelton. Don't forget, Derek Shelton won't celebrate 1 year in the organization until November 6th. He's still less than a year into this thing. And frankly, a year ago, he was Rocco Baldelli. He was coming from the Tampa Bay organization. He'd been with Toronto too, but he was coming from outside the organization less than a year ago. So people need to be careful with their talking points. It's kind of like saying the Twins haven't spent enough money lately, which in theory could be true, but they're coming off their biggest payroll in club history. They were 20th in payroll at the end of the year when they lost 103 games. And then they were 20th in payroll at the end of the year when they won 85 games and went to the playoffs in 2017. So there's not a lot of correlation causation. It's more about how you spend rather than what you spend. Now, with that said, I'm going to be working on my Twins off-season, blueprint, I guess.
Yeah.
And so that's going to be coming out here pretty soon. I think people are going to be really enthused about that. But there's a lot going on here. The Twins have about $30 million hard committed, about 60-some million with arbitration raises, which means they could spend as much as $60 million in free agency just to match last year's opening day payroll.
I think the dynamic between Rocco Baldelli and the media that covers him, and perhaps a certain segment of the Twins fan base as a whole, is going to be interesting, because I'm inclined initially to take his side, not only because of I kind of like the youth movement in baseball, and I think it's kind of fun that you have, a guy in his mid-40s, a guy in his mid-30s running the team. Now you have a guy who's, again, looks like he could go out and play, a younger guy managing the team, but also likely a younger roster going forward. I think it's not only the guys, the names that we all know, but there's going to be an emphasis on how do you get the most out of these guys who are kind of, to use a pretty awful phrase, like kind of half-baked, right? The guys who are like, have gotten through the prospect system but aren't maybe even not even AA, AAA yet. How do you get the most out of Royce Lewis and Thorpe and all? You go down the list.
Well, and avoid that incubation process in the big leagues where they're playing like they're not quite ready or not quite living up to their billing, which you have to remember, baseball's hard. And so Max Kepler's not a disappointment. He made it to the big leagues. That's huge. Yeah. So I get where you're coming from.
Yeah. And who knows, maybe they find something out with Kepler. I worry a little bit, and I don't want to go too far down this road, that maybe him or players like him are more change of scenery guys, or maybe they try to flip him, grab some more prospects or something like that. But I think they're focusing beyond these younger guys. I still think, even though Minnesota's mid-market team and that, they certainly should be able to retain with Target Field and the passion of the fan base and all this good players here, I still think it's still a draft and development process that is going to turn them into a winner, that they have more hits than misses, and that the guys who turn out to be good should be, and that you have a handful of Brian Dozier's who come out of nowhere and perform. Having said all that,
I mean, the Dodgers do that every year with Chris Taylor and Max Muncy.
Yeah, exactly. And even the bigger market teams that, as you just mentioned, have figured out that you get yourself in trouble even if you have, it seems like, an infinite payroll, trying to go with older players that are a little too expensive. So regardless of, I thought it was interesting that Falvey described him as like a partner, that he's not just going to be a manager, but have input into, he mentioned the Dominican facility they have out there as an example. That's where you see the stark difference. I think with Paul Molitor, he was open-minded. I cannot emphasize enough, a very thoughtful, kind person who was not, he never big-timed you. It was never, I'm Paul Molitor and who are you talking to?
You're not.
Yeah, right. I mean, there was never, and if anything, he not shied away, but completely shunned any questions about himself as a player. He really wanted to talk about his guys. Having said that, he's still the Minnesota icon, still the local guy, still older, still maybe a little more set in his ways. And it started to make sense with me that it's like, this guy seems like, it seems like they pulled in their buddy. And actually, what was the connection? Like, Falvey's brother played with Baldelli's. Do you remember that connection? It was brought up briefly.
It was at not Liberty, but I can't remember which college it was. It was someone's brother played with someone's brother or something like that. It was I think it was Falvey that said it. It was very early in the press conference. I have the transcript up here, but I don't know if it found its way into the transcript. But I can find it.
And it's not. I'm not suggesting nepotism but I mean, it just seems like these guys. We just don't know what Paul Molitor really thought of the opener, and if maybe he was okay with that, but maybe he wasn't pushing analytics in one direction. I think it's more he was open to it, but maybe didn't aspire to be on the vanguard of it. His strength was, I see things on the baseball field no one else sees. Phenomenal, right? Has a lot of value, but this Baldelli I see is more, his strength is, he's almost kind of one of the guys, right? He wants to have a relationship with all these guys. Certainly he will be an authority figure, but his strength also just seems to be, it seems to be relationships. And then my guess is this guy, I'm not suggesting they're using the opener. I don't know how that's all going to go, but he's on the vanguard analytically. He is going to bring what Tampa did well to a larger market or similar size market, really, but with, passionate fans and a better stadium and owners we think will spend. They're never going to be Steinbrenners, but we'll spend if the team looks good. I know that sounds funny to some people, but again, look at the track record here, as you mentioned with last year, and that should work. You know what I mean? Like that's not that complicated. And I go back to, I think they got the right guy because of his attitude, because of his approach, and because he was in the Rays system before.
Yeah, his brother played with Derek at Trinity College.
Okay.
Is what the transcript says. So, yeah, we saw this dynamic at play a little bit with Andrew Friedman, who Baldelli mentioned for a minute was the GM who hired him after his career ended. He's now gone on to the Dodgers and has taken, obviously the money part of it. He's been able to spend some money, but also the concepts that made the Rays good back when they were battling the higher priced Yankees and Red Sox and making playoff appearances, a decade ago when Evan Longoria and David Price were baby Rays. Taking those guys out of that small market and giving them the chance to spend a little more money it's been a good thing so far. And I think that coaching too should help, getting out of some of those smaller market mind frames should be a good thing. So I did put out the bat signal for questions. I don't know when you want to start taking those, if you have anything else you saw or whatever, but we do have a handful of those as well.
Yeah, we'll take those in a sec. Let me finish that thought there. Do you anticipate do you think Baldelli in some ways is up against it? I think you and I probably, unless he really does some stupid things, we'll probably take his side because especially you really are more forward thinking with the game. I think maybe with younger fans or stat savvy, the people that read fan graphs and all that stuff will probably take his side. Do you think he's up against it, given that he's replacing Molitor, that Patrick Royston, I think because it's public, we can state this, made it very obvious he's against the opener in a question / statement to him, that Molitor was seen as open-minded, and that there just are people here who don't want to see openers, who don't want the math in baseball, that don't understand why Mauer led off or this. Do you feel like he's up against it, or do you think that you win, 7 of the first 10 games and this all goes away?
I feel like people are so apathetic about it right now that it might be hard for them to muster that much care. And that's what sucks about covering the Twins right now, is getting people interested, even if they're playing decently well like they did in 2017. I think it'll be similar to Gabe Kapler or maybe Mickey Callaway, the Phillies and Mets respectively, where with Kapler, he had some missteps early, but really picked up some steam and then, kind of went slowed down at the end of the year. And Callaway made a few mistakes, but I think if the Twins had their way, they would have hired him last year instead of bringing back Molitor. So 2 managers that were obviously very highly regarded in terms of the process of being hired, and they both kind of went in opposite directions. I think Kapler really endeared himself to Phillies fans towards the middle of the season, whereas I'm not sure Callaway necessarily did at any point in the year and could already be on thin ice after another weak year, next year maybe. But nevertheless, I think out of the box, hopefully they'll give him a clean slate. And I think a lot of people are saying too, this is the Twins' cheap hire. I saw some people saying they were going to wait until all the good managers were taken and then just pick whoever's left. Well, guess what? They hired the guy who interviewed with basically every single team. Now they'll spin that as, well, nobody else wanted him, and so the Twins got him. No. This is a guy who could have possibly had his pick of at least, I would say, 3 of those jobs and chose Minnesota. And you know why? Because he liked the ownership, believe it or not. He liked the people in the building, the Dave St. Peters. He loved talking to the Levines and Falveys, put him at peace. And he just felt like this is a place he could put down roots as a home for baseball. He knew he wasn't going to get the Rays job anytime soon. Kevin Cash just signed an extension through the 2024 season. He said it was a tough decision to leave the Rays organization. I think Dan Hayes said it was like 18 out of 19 or 19 out of 20 years of his baseball career in and out of the game have been spent with Tampa Bay. But that should tell you how this job was viewed, that Falvey and Levine were not blowing smoke when they said, for as bad as this year was for us, this is still a job around the league that is coveted. So I think Baldelli is going to bring a new energy. And that's not to diminish what Molitor did or could have done or should have done. But I just think that I think he's going to get a clean slate. Now, there'll be fans who we don't really care about their opinions because they're just so fringy, off to the side opinions. But I think for the most part, he's going to get a clean slate here.
Yeah, let me kick off the questions since we'll jump into those, but I'm sure this will come up. Who, if anyone, do you think will be retained from this coaching staff?
Yeah, Matt Trueblood asked that first question as well.
Trueblood and I are always on the same page. Always on the same page. Trueblood and I are always on the same page. Always obviously, on the same page.
Friend of the show. He's been on the program a couple times. Gun to my head, I would say Rowson, Alston, Shelton, and Pickler will come back. Glenn and Guardado will not. I think those other 4 are safe. I mean, they're all a year or 2 into their time with the Twins. I think they're wonderful coaches. And honestly, I couldn't say a bad word about Glenn. I couldn't say a bad word about Guardado. So what does that leave? Rudy Hernandez. I mean, I could see Rudy being gone and they bring in another Spanish speaker. And
he did emphasize that
Jeff Smith.
He wants diversity on the staff.
Yeah.
I mean,
he's got 2 African Americans. He's got Pickler, who is Caucasian, but I think, Jeff Smith could be on the outs too, but he's been in the organization for so long, they may just reassign him to the minor leagues again. But I would guess there's probably 3 coaches that end up on the outs. Guardado, Glenn, and either Rudy or Smith, maybe all 4. And I love Gene Glenn. I love Eddie Guardado. And if they brought him back, I wouldn't even think twice about it. But Rocco's going to want to bring in at least 1 or 2 of his own guys, if not more.
Yeah, and just to finish that point, it's because he wants strong relationships with everyone. He's convinced he can have it, but I think he also knows that with a language barrier, there may be something lost. And I thought it was interesting that he not only answered that question, but actually, I think took a question that initially was a little bit softer and took a hard stance. That was important to him. Yeah,
he did a good job with his quotes today. I think he gets the role that we play, asking questions, and I mean, he doesn't have any information to guard at this point. He hasn't talked to any of the players really or anything like that, but he did a nice job.
So another question.
All right. Ryan Coppendreyer wants to know which player will benefit most from Baldelli. I mean, is it too easy to say Buxton? I mean, you're looking at oft-injured center fielders that they're kindred spirits in a lot of ways, aren't they?
That stood out to me at first. I mean, obviously, I think there's going to be a Buxton, Sano, the young stars, right? Barrios will be emphasized early on. God, Buxton's a great call. I think to me that's the guy.
I think Matt Kepler's the wild card there because
yes.
Again, outfielder, guy who's got some potential but just hasn't quite got there. So, I mean, it could be really anybody. It could be Jorge Polanco becoming a superstar for all we know. But
or maybe Garver at the plate. Who knows?
Yeah. I mean, who knows how he's going to return from the concussion too. I mean, I wrote in that Brewers piece that people should check out, zonecoverage.com. Each of their catchers has a question mark, and if you could clone them or mold them into one catcher, you'd have a pretty darn good guy. But between the 3 of them, you've got enough question marks that it's worth asking. Colin Nelson wants to know if Baldelli is well liked in the industry in terms of getting free agents to come to Minnesota because of his presence. I mean, I don't know how much that actually exists. I mean, players may want to play with Joe Madden, but like with, in the case of Ben Zobrist, I mean, he'd played with him before. So it becomes, are you going to draw players from Tampa who played for Baldelli? Well, not many of those guys are hitting free agency right now. I mean, it's like a CJ Crone or, I mean, Denard Span. And, they didn't really have that long of careers, and it's not really needs for the Twins. So honestly, I don't think it's going to be a huge deal, but he's obviously well enough liked that he's a game changer in that dugout and in that clubhouse.
Do you, not a free agent, but where do you think Mauer stands? If you're gun to your head.
Mauer?
Joe Mauer, yeah. I mean, I know he had that send-off.
I think he's retiring. I think he's retiring.
And you think that's no matter who was hired as the...
Yeah, yep. I don't think the manager had anything to do with it. I think the writing was on the wall with how that Sunday was handled, and there's no coming back from that. It's like when they carried Ken Griffey Jr. off the field, and then he came back the next year, ended up falling asleep in the dugout, and it just went downhill from there. So I don't think there's a good way to have him come back. I mean, I'm not saying it would ruin everything, but I just think he's done.
Yeah, I don't want to linger on that too. I guess the only concern with him is that he's got to know he's done, because I think if he leaves, says all the right things, and then is a Baltimore Oriole a year from now, we'll be like, what the hell, man? But I'm inclined to believe you. I'm curious with the timing. I thought maybe he would have announced by now, but I think you're right. I don't know how much this hire affected him.
Keith Cooper wants to know what makes a good manager. Why should I be for or against this hiring? I mean, for me, a good manager is a communicator, is a leader, and can captivate his team with his vision. And I just think that Baldelli said all the right things without coming off as not genuine. And so for me, people I've talked to that have played for him, both on and off the record, rave about him. And I don't know. I mean, I was a big Gabe Kapler guy and a Mickey Callaway guy going into last year. The Twins ended up bringing Mulder back. I had no problem with that. But when I started reading and doing some research on Baldelli, man, it's hard not to really, really like this guy. And so I think he's going to do a wonderful job.
Yeah, even older players, I think, will respect the fact that I think had for not this freak medical thing, he probably would have been a star, 6th overall pick, as we said, escalated through the minors, all that stuff. I think he'll even have respect with players that, to be honest, will be around his age. We know that if a Torrey Hunter type enters the locker room, you would think that someone like that would have respect for him.
Tyler Austin's biceps, pretty awesome Twitter name, wants to know if any players have shown support for the hiring current or ex. I don't want to blow my cover, but I do have an ex-player of his that will be in my article that will be appearing late this evening, or if you're listening to this now, it will be late Thursday evening. But yes, universal support, whether it's been Jake Odorizzi in Dan Hayes' piece on The Athletic, or just any, it's been universal. I have not heard anybody say anything negative, of course, but it's been a handful of players who've worked with him that are in support. So I think it's a good move.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I shouldn't say that. The player who you have in your article, could not have been more complimentary of him.
Yep, and it's a name that Twins fans will definitely identify with.
Yes.
Turn Up Hair Baseball wants to know more about Rocco's early days in the big, shot up through the system. Great first 2 years. How will that help the development of the young players on the roster and prospects that will be up soon? Well, he did talk about that story with Lou Piniella, who basically brought him in and he said, son, and then he probably swore and said, yeah, this is what you're doing. You got to feel safe. What he did for Rocco after Rocco finished third in Rookie of the Year balloting in 2003 was Rocco started slumping in 2004, and Piniella said, look, you're going to be in the lineup no matter what. Go out, have some fun, just play baseball, man, and don't worry about going 0 for 4 and being out of the lineup the next day. And I think that was a good lesson for him as a player, but also a good lesson as a communicator / manager now is like, you need to put your guys at peace with their roles, whether they play once a week or 6 or 7 days a week. And I think he's got the capability of doing that.
Yeah.
Joe wants to know, do you think the most important aspect of a manager is to develop relationships with the players to make the team more trusting, or is it relaying information from the front office to the players to create a partnership? Which of those is more desirable? I don't think I could pick one or the other. They both sound pretty important to me. How about you?
To me, I think his strength, this is a little bit indirect, but it will be truly if he can connect with every player in the locker room. That's tough. I mean, these guys come from all different backgrounds, drafted high, drafted low, make different money, all that stuff. I think if he can, I think that's important above all else because he has to have the player committed entirely to what the front office wants and the vision that he and Falvey and Levine have for the team. I think the second thing is occasionally it's not a bad thing to be like, it's a little us versus them, right? Even if it's a little contrived, being like, man, they're putting pressure on us. The fans are off, they're on our butts. Falvey just came down here and said, I don't even know if you should be in the rotation or something like that. I think if he has that relationship and, I think that is going to be his strength because I think he's just very different than what's been in Minnesota before. You think of crusty old Tom Kelly and Gardy, his chipper and goofy attitude, and Mulder, who commanded respect with his with his career,
his resume.
Resume. I think that this is it's a different circumstance. I really think it's going to have to be like, come on, bud, you take care of me, and I'll take care of you, something like that.
Yeah, I think both of those things are extremely important, and I probably couldn't pick one or the other. All right, so the last one we got, and it's actually a really good one from one of our more dedicated fans. Devlin Clark wants to know, when Rocco said it's about analytics, or when he said about analytics, that it's only one part and getting it communicated to the player is another part, what were your thoughts? And I think I kind of touched on that I mean, you can have all the information in the world, but there's such a thing as overload. I mean, you can't go to the plate saying, okay, if it's 1-1, I'm getting a slider. If it's 1-2, I'm getting a curveball. If it's 2-1, I'm getting a fastball. You have to be adequately mentally prepared coming into the plate appearance and then just kind of read and react from there. And so analytics, I mean, the plays on the field start with decisions on the field, which start or are influenced by statistics, data analyzed off the field. And so it's part of a process, a workflow, if you want to call it that, of synthesizing that information, turning it into digestible bites that players can understand. You know, it's like the food process. You know, you get all this grain, but you got to turn it into cereal or beer or, you know, whatever you want to turn it into that player wants to consume. And some of your guys want to consume fruits and vegetables, and some of your guys want to consume beer. You have to, through the process of those conversations, figure out which guys are which, and then meet them there to make them the best player they possibly can. That's where the terms partnership and synergy and relationship come into play. And that's where I think he's going to be better than maybe people expect. Now he's been in the room. He's rubbed shoulders with some pretty impressive baseball men. Lou Piniella, Joe Madden, Kevin Cash. I mean, 3 wonderful managers. That's one place Tampa Bay has really been fortunate. You know, they've had their issues with attendance and payroll, and I mean, the fact that they're still a fairly new team trying to build roots in a retirement community that requires a hour-long bridge ride to get there. I mean, for crying out loud, it's a disaster, for lack of a better way to put it. But they've been blessed in the managerial thing, and I think picking players off that tree, just like Toronto did earlier today. Actually, it's kind of funny. Baldelli said, "I'm not totally sure I can say this publicly."
Yeah, there was some funny moments in that press conference.
Yeah,
that was one of them.
Well, the Spanish segue too. I'm not going to spoil it because I want people to watch the YouTube video, youtube.com/StoneCoverage. The Spanish segue was really, really good, where he went from "Do you speak Spanish?" to the Spanish guy asking a question in Spanish.
Yes,
was wonderful. I don't see how anybody could have watched that presser and not come away confident that he was the right guy, based on everything fans could possibly know from this side of the glass, to lead this team to the next, whether you want them to be a wild card team next year, AL Central crown, AL contender for the pennant, whatever you think, he's the guy.
I have. Was that the final question from the?
That's all I have. Yeah.
Let me toss one last thing at you because I can't let this go.
Sure.
David Roberts, Rocco Baldelli, David Bell, Alex Cora, Brad Osmus.
I know where you're going with this.
Boone, Kapler, Hinch, Council. What do those guys have in common?
MVP 2005, isn't it, or is it 2004?
Yes, you can create an entire lineup of current managers in MVP Baseball 2005. I think I understand it's a lot of ex-players that are in the game. I think the other thing this tells you is that what the Twins are doing is weird for the Twins, going outside the organization, going young, although I would argue Tom Kelly and I'm completely blanking on it, the current Phillies GM, McPhail, were very young at the time, and you know, all that stuff.
They keep saying they were just trying to get their act together. I mean, that was their first year 87 thing was, we weren't trying to contend, we were just trying to get our act together.
Right. And so this should reassure people. What the Twins are doing is weird for the Twins. It is very on par with what other teams are doing. Younger. Go ahead.
And can I just say this? This is the first time I felt like the manager was a peer instead of an authority figure. And I mean, I'm not saying he's not the kind of guy who's going to command a room or I'm going to feel respect for asking a question. But I felt like, and maybe it was because I had met him at Target Field. It was kind of a funny story, actually. But this is a guy that's 5 years older than me. And he feels like a peer rather than, you know, like your dad's friends or your grandpa's friends or whatever. You know what I mean? It's just very much a guy who's right around our age. And maybe it's because I grew up with that Moneyball era A's, you know, 2004 Twins, 2003, 2004 was like my last year of high school. And so these guys are all roughly my age. But it's kind of cool to have someone that feels like more of a peer rather than this generational gap, which, again, no disrespect to Paul Molitor because it's out of his control. But I always did feel like, you know, he was the adult even when I was a little kid. And that's hard for me to look past.
Yeah, I think that's a fair observation. I'm really looking forward to it. I actually, again, to reiterate exactly where I'm coming from, I was pro Molitor, just a fan of him as a guy, as a baseball man, as someone who really, felt like a Minnesota guy before even a Hall of Famer. And and I thought I hope, I don't know if it'll be this year. I'm sure he's still not thrilled that they fired him, but I hope at some point comes back and has a role that is strictly dedicated to what are you seeing on the field and how to relay that to the players as quick as possible. Tells, little indicators, all that stuff. I think that's
there's no question he's got value to whatever organization he works with next,
Yes.
whether it's coaching in the big leagues in the front office or whether it's coaching his son. I think it's Ben, play like
Yes.
13-year-old ball next summer. Whatever he does is going to bring value to that organization. And so I hope it's in Minnesota, but we'll see.
But from there, I said when he was fired that I think it's perfectly fair for Falvey and Levine to go get their guy. I'm glad they went and got a guy like Rocco Baldelli.
You just stole that from Luke Inman.
Yeah, go get your guys.
Go get your guys.
GGYG. Yeah, no, but in all seriousness, I thought it was completely fair, and I'm glad they chose a person like him. I just think he is going to be both for the players, but I just think for the organization. He just came off as incredibly earnest, thoughtful. You had the final question, Brandon Warne, final question at the press conference. You had asked him kind of about his experiences, and he went a completely different direction, saying he likes to travel the world and see how different people live. And he just, I think this guy really has an interesting perspective that is important for winning for the Minnesota Twins.
I can actually read his answer because I think people need to hear it.
Yeah.
So we'll wrap up on this, but I asked him, what did you learn as a player? And then what did you learn as a coach, and how were those things different? And I thought of that question actually the night before while I was falling asleep, because I knew the presser was going to be at 3:00 on Thursday afternoon. And I just thought, I can ask all these normal questions. And I did ask, why Minnesota, which it's kind of a layup of a question, but this question really stuck out to me. And so he says, I don't really look at it as being different. I look at it as what I was exposed to. That's generally the way I look at a lot of things. I'll get abstract on you for a second. I've always believed traveling and going and seeing how people live and meeting other people and observing what goes on in other places teaches you a lot. It gives you an idea that maybe what you're doing might not be the end all at the end of the day. I think it relates really to all aspects of life and really to baseball. When I was playing, I was exposed to certain things. When I stopped playing, even towards the end of my career, we were already starting to talk about some new ideas. Now, that doesn't mean every idea is right. It does mean it's going to help you have success or it doesn't mean that it's going to help you have success in any way. But I started thinking about a lot of things, and I was exposed to a lot of things with our front office when I went to work for them. That gave me a really good foundation of a completely different way of looking at certain things. Now, I actually do believe that when you take a lot of traditional aspects of the game and teaching methods and things like that, and generally good baseball knowledge, and combine that with good information and good people to convey that information, that's when things really work out well. That simple equation is what I would hope we end up getting going here. So I really think what he says is we can know all we need to know about the game on the field. We can have all the information off the field, but we need to synchronize those two in order to be the best that we can be. Is that pretty accurate as how you felt too?
That's yes. And I thought it was an amazing answer. I thought it was, again, I just think this guy he's unique, very much a baseball guy, make no doubt about it. But yeah, I'm just very fascinated where this goes. Do you have any final thoughts?
I'm enthused about this one. I did have, some people say, oh, you would think that no matter what they did was great. Yeah. But I was a little more lukewarm on Molitor the last couple of years, even though I had utmost respect for him as a human, as a baseball mind and everything. But I felt like whether it was the writing on the wall with the new leadership group or just the team not really moving in a direction that was positive, I just felt like when I was in Kansas City, especially at the end of May, the wheels were going to come off, and it probably was not going to be Molitor, maybe even by the end of the year, but especially not into next year. So for them to go out and get who I think was the most hotly contested managerial candidate, we don't know what he got paid. It really doesn't matter what he got paid. But I think the Twins have started off the off season with a bang, with a home run, and now they have plenty of money to spend. I'm not gonna give away anything, but I think they need to make one big move in free agency, a couple other small moves, and maybe a trade. This is gonna be a way different looking team. Falvey and Levine said as much on their season-ending conference call. I'm enthused about this 2019 Twins team from a standpoint of how good they can be. And this is a wide open AL, man. It's wide open. I mean, I know Houston's awesome and Boston's awesome, but all you got to do, if you get to the dance in October, you have a chance. Get to the dance and you have a chance. Milwaukee showed that this fall, and they took the freaking Dodgers to 7 games on their own field. They nearly beat them at Miller Park. That should make Twins fans very enthused. What do you say?
I agree. Like I said, I'm looking forward to it. I think they went out and got the right guy. Follow along, read Brandon's thing on the Brewers. I pushed you to write that article. I'm sure it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
And
you haven't even read it yet. Well,
yeah, it's gotten buried between. I know you caught me there. It's gotten buried with all the Butler drama and the this and that. Please go read it. I will have read it by the time you probably listen to this. Read our reactions to yours will be out a little bit quicker than mine, but to Rocco and yeah, I think it gives people something to look forward to. It's going to be hopefully a crazy season next year.
Read zonecoverage.com, subscribe. You can click on a link on my Twitter profile for a friends and family discount. $19.99 gets you a year's subscription, a t-shirt, a gift card to My Burger, a gift card to Buffalo Wild Wings, and what else? Let's see. You can read Twins, Wild, Wolves, everything you want to read. Vikings especially, they're going to be having a big game this Sunday against the Saints. He's Tom Schreier at TSchreier3. I'm Brandon Warne at Brandon_Warne. Mike Berardino will be back in this chair again very soon at Mike Berardino. But you've been listening to Midwest Swing. Find us on Twitter at Midwest Swing Pod. And until next time, so long.